Shut it down, the old man said. His voice was quiet, almost lost beneath the rising whine of the Black Hawk's auxiliary power unit. But something in it made Specialist Noah Reed glance up from his laptop. Across the flight line, 3 diagnostic screens glowed green beneath the hard Alabama sun. Fuel pressure normal. Hydraulic pressure normal. Flight controls normal. No active faults. The UH-60 Black Hawk sat on the concrete with its dark rotor blades motionless against a pale morning sky. Call sign Raven 27 painted beneath the cockpit window. It was supposed to carry a mountain rescue team 60 miles north before a storm sealed the ridgeline. Instead, it had failed 3 start sequences without leaving a single error code behind. Ethan Cole, the lead avionics technician, stood beside the open equipment cart with a headset around his neck and impatience tightening his jaw. At 30, he was the youngest team leader on the base, top of his certification class, fluent in every diagnostic system attached to the aircraft. He turned toward the old man, standing beyond the yellow safety line. Thomas Avery wore faded khaki pants, a weathered field jacket, and boots polished more by time than effort. A worn leather tool pouch hung from one hand. He looked less like an aviation expert than someone who had taken a wrong turn on the way to a veteran's luncheon. "Did you see something on the display?" Ethan called. Tom kept his eyes on the helicopter. "No." Ethan gave a short laugh. "Then what exactly are we shutting down for?" The rescue pilot was already climbing into the cockpit. Crew members loaded medical packs through the side door while dark clouds gathered above the distant hills. Every lost minute narrowed their window. Tom lifted his chin slightly. "Start it again." Ethan folded his arms. "We have started it again. For times." "Then do it once more." A few younger technicians exchanged amused looks. Ethan glanced at the green screens, then at the old man. General Whitmore had personally requested that Thomas Avery be allowed onto the flight line, but she had not explained why. Sentiment, Ethan assumed. Some retired mechanic invited out to feel useful. Around an aircraft he barely understood. "All right," Ethan said, loud enough for the team to hear. "One more time. Maybe Mr. Avery can explain what the computers missed." The pilot initiated the sequence. The auxiliary power unit rose into a steady whine. Indicator lights flickered across the instrument panel. Relays began closing beneath the skin of the aircraft, each sound small and precise. Tom's expression changed. Not fear. Recognition. He raised one finger. "Listen." A clean metallic click came from behind the avionics bay. Half a beat later, softer and wrong, came another. Tom's eyes hardened. "There." Ethan looked at the screens. Every reading remained green. "They're what?" "The first click is the relay closing," Tom said. "The second is it letting go." Ethan shook his head. "The system says the circuit is holding." Tom finally looked at him. His pale blue eyes carried the stillness of someone who had learned long ago that machines often failed before instruments admitted it. "Your system is reading electricity," he said. "I'm listening to the aircraft." Ethan turned toward the cockpit and signaled the pilot to continue. The rotor blades gave a slight mechanical twitch. Tom stepped closer to the yellow line. "Do not let that helicopter lift." Ethan's voice cooled. "You are not authorized to make that call." Tom watched the pilot reach for the next switch. The wrong click echoed in his memory, older than the men around him and sharper than the heat on the concrete. "No," he said, "but I once buried a friend because everyone else heard that sound and decided it meant nothing." Ethan held Tom's gaze for a moment, then looked away first. The rescue pilot paused with one gloved hand above the overhead panel, waiting for a decision. Beyond the flight line, the mountains were disappearing beneath a wall of dark cloud. Weather radar showed the storm moving faster than forecast, and the county rescue team had already reported that 2 hikers were stranded near a ridge almost 60 miles north. Raven 27 was the only aircraft configured with the hoist equipment needed to reach them. Every minute mattered. Ethan raised his hand and signaled the pilot to stop. The sequence. The auxiliary power unit wound down, leaving a broad silence across the concrete. "Run the complete diagnostic again," he ordered. His team moved quickly. Cables were reconnected. Data logs were reopened. Noah Reed checked the electrical system while 2 technicians inspected the hydraulic lines and fuel controls. The screens returned the same answer they had given all morning. No recorded fault. No unstable voltage. No failed component. Ethan pointed to the results. The aircraft is clean. Tom remained near the yellow line, listening to the faint ticks of cooling metal. Clean is not the same as safe. Ethan's jaw tightened. We have checked the starter circuit, the main relay assembly, the fuel control, and every sensor tied to the sequence. We replaced 2 components that were not even outside tolerance. The manufacturer's support team reviewed the data remotely. Nothing is wrong. Tom looked at the Black Hawk as though Ethan had not spoken. The aircraft rested in the heat, dark windows reflecting the moving clouds. A thin trace of hydraulic fluid scented the air. Its rotor blades sagged slightly at the tips, heavy and still. How long did you let it cool between starts? Tom asked. That is not relevant. How long? Ethan glanced at Noah. 7 minutes, maybe 8. Tom nodded once. Let it sit for 15. A technician near the equipment cart smiled. Another shook his head. Ethan heard them and felt his authority being tested by the presence of a man who had not shown a credential, opened a panel, or touched a single tool. We are not waiting 15 minutes because you heard a noise, he said. Tom placed the leather pouch carefully on the ground. Its surface was scarred and faded, the brass clasp polished smooth by decades of use. Then ask the machine the same question while it is cold. Ethan stepped closer. These aircraft are not the helicopters you worked on 50 years ago. They are monitored by redundant systems. They record failures before a human ear can recognize them. Usually, Tom said. The single word landed harder than an argument. Noah looked down at the waveform from the last start attempt. He expanded the audio trace. Captured by a maintenance microphone near the avionics compartment. 2 narrow peaks appeared less than a second apart. He adjusted the scale and stared. The second peak was smaller, but it was there. Mr. Cole, Noah said carefully, he may be right about the sound. Ethan turned. What did you say? Noah rotated the screen. The relay closes here. Then there is another mechanical response 0.6 of a second later. It does not show a voltage loss, but something moves. Ethan studied the trace, unwilling to accept what it suggested. Tom did not smile. He did not claim victory. He watched the clouds sink lower over the hills and quietly asked, how much time does that rescue team have? Noah checked the weather update. Less than 40 minutes before the ridge closes. Tom looked back at Raven 27. Then we have 15 minutes to learn whether that click is a warning or a goodbye. The 15 minutes passed beneath a silence that felt heavier than the storm clouds gathering over the mountains. Ethan kept his team moving, but every task had already been performed twice. Noah reviewed the electrical trace. 2 technicians checked the starter circuit again. The pilot remained in the cockpit, helmet resting against the seat, watching the weather clock count down. Tom stood outside the yellow line with his hands folded behind his back. He did not approach the aircraft. He did not touch his leather pouch. He simply listened as the Black Hawk cooled beneath the Alabama sun. Metal contracted with faint ticks inside the fuselage. Wind moved along the rotor blades with a low, hollow breath. Ethan watched him from the diagnostic cart. What exactly are you listening for now? He asked. The difference between cooling and relaxing, Tom replied. One technician gave a quiet laugh. Ethan did not. The old man had predicted the second click before it happened, and Noah had found proof of it in the recording. Still, a sound was not a diagnosis. Ethan walked to the yellow line and stopped several feet from Tom. You understand that this is a modern aircraft with layered monitoring systems. We do not ground it because someone has a feeling. Tom looked toward the avionics compartment. I do not have a feeling. Then give me a component. Not yet. Ethan's patience sharpened. That is not how maintenance works. It was before the screen started teaching men to stop asking questions. The words drew several faces toward them. Ethan lowered his voice. You were invited here as a courtesy. General Whitmore did not place you in charge of my team. Tom's expression remained calm. Then lead them. Ethan stepped back, caught by the absence of challenge in the answer. Tom was not trying to take command. That made his presence more difficult to dismiss. Noah approached with the maintenance microphone. The aircraft has been cold for 16 minutes, he said. Ethan glanced at the mountain weather report. The rescue window had narrowed to 24 minutes. He signaled the pilot. Begin the sequence. The auxiliary power unit came alive. Its whine climbed across the flight line. Tom closed his eyes. Not dramatically. He simply removed every distraction. Ethan watched the screens as system after system turned green. Fuel pressure stabilized. Electrical load rose. The first relay closed with a clean metallic click. Tom lifted one finger. 3, he said softly. Ethan looked at him. 2. Noah stopped breathing. 1. The second click came from behind the panel, faint but unmistakable. A fraction of a second later, the auxiliary power unit hesitated. The screens remained green. Ethan stared at the numbers. No voltage drop. Tom opened his eyes. Because the contact returned before the system knew it had left. Noah moved closer to the panel, but Ethan raised a hand. Nobody opens anything yet. Tom studied him. You heard it. I heard a mechanical sound. That does not prove a failure. Then run it again. Ethan hesitated. Immediately. Yes. The pilot restarted the sequence without allowing the system to cool. This time, the first click sounded clean. The second never came. Ethan turned toward Tom with restrained satisfaction. Nothing. Tom looked at the warm fuselage. Exactly. The team fell quiet. Ethan's expression changed as the meaning reached him. The fault appeared only when the aircraft was cold, then vanished. As heat expanded the contact, Tom nodded toward the sealed panel. Your computers are not lying to you, Mr. Cole. They are answering the question you asked. The problem is that you asked it after the evidence disappeared. For a moment, the Alabama flight line vanished from Tom Avery's eyes. The rising whine of the auxiliary power unit became the dry howl of desert wind, and the clean smell of heated metal turned into dust, hydraulic fluid, and old canvas. It was 1991 again, long before gray had entered his hair, on a temporary airfield marked by portable lights and rows of sand-colored shelters. A Black Hawk sat at the end of the strip with its engines quiet, and a medical crew waiting beside the open cabin. Somewhere beyond the horizon, an isolated unit needed evacuation before a fast-moving storm closed the route. The situation had been measured in minutes then, too. Tom had been a maintenance test pilot with oil on his sleeves and very little patience for machines that pretended to be healthy. Every instrument showed normal. Every ground check passed. Yet each cold start produced the same faint double click behind the avionics bay. The second sound was so soft that the younger technicians dismissed it as cooling metal. Tom did not. Machines had rhythm. Pumps, relays, valves, and bearings each entered the sequence at the proper moment. A wrong sound was rarely loud. It was simply out of place. Captain Rebecca Whitmore, 28 years old and newly assigned to flight operations, stood beside him with a clipboard pressed against her jacket. She was sharp, disciplined, and determined not to let an aging maintenance schedule delay a rescue. The readings are stable, she told him. We have clearance to launch. Tom kept his hand against the fuselage, feeling the vibration travel through the aluminum skin. Not with that relay opening twice. Rebecca looked toward the distant lights. There are people waiting, which is why this aircraft stays here until I know it can bring them back. Her expression hardened. The airfield commander had already approved the mission, and every official test supported the decision. Tom was one man standing between the Black Hawk and the runway. You understand what this could cost you, she said. Yes. And you are still refusing to release it? Tom looked at the sealed panel. I am refusing to let urgency turn into permission. He ordered the system shut down and waited for the aircraft to cool. 10 minutes later, the double click returned. He opened the panel and found a connector that appeared perfect beneath the inspection light. No corrosion, no loose wire, no visible damage. Then Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer, Tom's oldest friend on the crew, handed him a heat gun and said, "Ask it the right question." They cooled the connector, applied load, and watched the contact separate for less than a second. It was enough to interrupt the circuit, but too brief for the recorder to store as a fault. Heat expanded the metal and concealed the problem. Cold revealed it. Rebecca stood behind them, silent now, as Tom replaced the connector and ran the sequence again. One click, clean and final. The Black Hawk launched 12 minutes later and returned safely before dawn. Afterward, Daniel tapped the side of Tom's leather pouch and said, "Machines do not speak English, Tom. They speak timing." The memory faded with the sound of wind crossing the present-day rotor blades. Tom looked at Ethan and saw the same resistance Rebecca had carried 35 years earlier. I have heard this before, he said. The last time, the computers were also certain. Ethan looked from Tom to the sealed panel, then back to the diagnostic cart. The old man's certainty irritated him because it had no numbers attached to it. Yet Noah's recording had captured the double click twice, and the pattern was too precise to dismiss. Ethan ordered a focused scan of the starter circuit. The technicians worked quickly, entering commands, checking temperature changes, and comparing the latest readings with the earlier logs. A small fluctuation appeared in one sensor near the relay assembly. It remained within tolerance, but Ethan seized on it. "There," he said. "That is our problem." Tom studied the screen without moving closer. "Maybe." Ethan did not hear caution. He heard doubt. "It is the only unstable reading in the sequence." He directed the team to replace the sensor. Tools moved across the cart. Fasteners were removed. The old unit came out, and a new one went in. The rescue pilot checked the weather again. The remaining flight window had fallen below 20 minutes. Dark clouds pressed lower over the northern hills, turning the horizon the color of steel. When the panel was secured, Ethan signaled for another start. The auxiliary power unit rose smoothly. Lights moved across the cockpit. The first relay clicked. No second sound followed. The system held. A moment later, the rotor blades began to turn. Relief passed through the crew like a warm current. One technician slapped another on the shoulder. Noah released a breath he had been holding. Ethan watched the green indicators settle into perfect alignment, then looked toward Tom. "Sensor fault," he said. "The diagnostics found it." Tom did not answer. His attention remained fixed on the avionics bay. The rotor gathered speed, stirring hot air and dust across the concrete. Ethan mistook the silence for defeat. "You heard an effect," he continued. "We found the cause." Tom stepped closer to the yellow line. "Shut it down." The satisfaction disappeared from Ethan's face. "The sequence is stable. Because the aircraft is warm. We do not have time to repeat this." The pilot began the final checks. Medical equipment had been secured inside the cabin. The rescue crew moved toward the open door. Tom's eyes followed the instruments, then returned to the sealed panel. That sensor did not make the click. Ethan raised his voice above the rotor noise. "Every reading is normal. It was normal before. This aircraft is cleared." Tom crossed the yellow line. Noah called his name, but the old man kept moving, his jacket snapping in the rotor wash. He reached the ground power station and pulled the emergency cutoff. The auxiliary power unit wound down. The rotor slowed. The entire flight line fell into stunned silence. Ethan strode toward him, anger burning through every step. "You just interfered with an active rescue mission." Tom set the cutoff handle back into place. "I stopped you from trusting a warm connection. Security is on the way." "Good." Tom picked up his leather pouch and placed it beside the sealed panel. "By the time they arrive, the contact will be cold again." Ethan stood inches from him. "And when nothing happens?" Tom looked at the darkening mountains. "Then I will leave without another word." He turned back to the aircraft. "But when that second click returns, you will open this panel." Security arrived before the metal had finished cooling. Two military police officers crossed the flight line with measured steps, their eyes moving from Ethan's rigid posture to Tom, standing quietly beside the grounded Black Hawk. The rescue crew remained near the cabin, medical packs at their feet, while the pilot watched the weather close over the mountains. "This man entered the safety zone and shut down an aircraft without authorization," Ethan said. His voice was controlled, but anger pressed against every word. "He interfered with an active rescue operation." The senior officer looked at Tom. "Sir, I need you to step away from the helicopter." Tom obeyed without argument. He lifted his leather pouch from the concrete and returned to the yellow line. "How long?" he asked Noah. Noah checked the clock. 4 minutes since shutdown. Ethan turned sharply. "Stop assisting him." Noah lowered his eyes, but he did not put away the maintenance microphone. The senior officer studied Tom's weathered face and faded field jacket. "Do you have identification?" Tom reached slowly into his pocket and handed over an old military retirement card. The officer read the name, then looked at him again. "Chief Warrant Officer Thomas Avery." "Retired," Tom said. Ethan gave a humorless laugh. "Retired a long time ago." Tom did not respond. His attention remained on the Black Hawk, as if the accusation, the officers, and the gathered crew were only background noise. The aircraft clicked softly as heat left its skin. 5 minutes passed. Then 6. The mountain weather report updated again. The rescue corridor would close in 12 minutes. Ethan looked toward the pilot. "We cannot keep wasting time." Tom answered without turning. "Then do not waste the lesson." Ethan stepped forward. "You do not command this team. You do not decide whether this aircraft flies. You heard a sound, guessed at a cause, and disrupted a mission after we corrected the fault. Tom finally faced him. Then prove me wrong. The words were quiet. That made them impossible to ignore. Ethan looked at the security officers, then at the crew watching him. Pride and urgency pulled in opposite directions. At last, he signaled the pilot. One cold start. Nothing more. Noah positioned the microphone near the avionics bay. The flight line settled into silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. The pilot began the sequence. The auxiliary power unit rose. Lights appeared across the instrument panel. Every diagnostic returned green. The first relay closed with a clean metallic click. Ethan stared at the screen. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the second click sounded from behind the sealed panel. Smaller. Colder. Wrong. The auxiliary power unit hesitated. The rotor blades gave a slight twitch and stopped. No fault code appeared. No warning light remained. Nobody spoke. Ethan's face lost its anger first, then its color. Noah replayed the recording. Two sharp peaks stood less than a second apart. The senior security officer looked at Ethan. Do you still want him removed? Ethan did not answer. Tom set the leather pouch down beside the yellow line. Open the panel. This time, no one laughed. Noah stepped away from the group and pulled out his telephone. He sent the recording, the maintenance trace, and one short message to the office of Major General Rebecca Whitmore. Thomas Avery is here. They almost cleared the aircraft to fly. The reply came before he could lower the phone. Ground Raven 27. Preserve every log. Do not touch that panel until I arrive. Major General Rebecca Whitmore was halfway through a command briefing when the audio file reached her telephone. She listened once without moving. Around the conference table, officers continued discussing weather limitations, rescue routes, and the shrinking window over the northern ridge. Then the second click sounded through the small speaker. Rebecca raised one hand, and the room fell silent. She played it again. The first click was clean. The second arrived 0.6 of a second later, faint enough to escape an untrained ear and familiar enough to pull 35 years out of the past. Who sent this? She asked. Her aide checked the message. Specialist Noah Reed, ma'am. From Raven 27. Rebecca read the next line herself. Thomas Avery is here. They almost cleared the aircraft to fly. Her chair moved backward across the floor. Ground that helicopter. Preserve every maintenance log. Nobody opens the panel until I arrive. The colonel beside her looked confused. General, the county rescue team has less than 10 minutes before weather closes the route. Then prepare the standby aircraft from the eastern hangar. It does not have the same hoist package. Transfer the package. She was already moving toward the door. And find Chief Warrant Officer Avery's original maintenance records. Her aide followed quickly. Ma'am, his file may not be in the current system. Rebecca did not slow down. Then call aviation archives. Use my authority. The response traveled through the base in a rising chain of voices. Flight operations halted Raven 27. The eastern hangar began transferring rescue equipment to a reserve Black Hawk. Maintenance control locked the diagnostic logs. Aviation archives searched records that had not been opened in decades. On the flight line, Ethan received each order through his headset and felt the ground shift beneath his certainty. Tom remained outside the yellow line, quiet as before. He did not ask who had been called. He did not seem surprised when the security officer stepped away from him. Noah watched the access road. A black command vehicle appeared beyond the hangars and crossed the base at a speed that made every technician straighten. It stopped near the equipment cart. Rebecca Whitmore stepped out before her aide reached the door. Silver stars caught the dull morning light on her uniform. The team snapped to attention. Ethan moved forward to report, but the general walked past him. She passed the green diagnostic screens, the sealed panel, and the officers waiting for instructions. She stopped in front of Tom Avery. For several seconds, neither spoke. Rebecca's expression held the weight of recognition and an old debt she had never forgotten. You still hear them, she said. Tom looked toward the Black Hawk. They still speak. The general's eyes moved to the leather pouch at his feet. Time softened her voice. The listener. The nickname crossed the flight line like a current. Noah saw Ethan's face change. Rebecca turned toward the gathered team. This man kept aircraft in the air before most of our current procedures had names. He helped write the cold load inspection standard your software uses today. She looked directly at Ethan. And if Thomas Avery says that helicopter is not safe, It does not leave the ground. Ethan glanced at Tom, then lowered his eyes. Rebecca pointed toward the sealed avionics panel. Chief Avery, Raven 27 is yours. Tom shook his head once. No, General. The team stared. Tom looked at Ethan. It belongs to them. I am only going to teach them how to hear it. Tom waited until Ethan stepped forward. The younger technician moved slowly, no longer carrying the hard certainty he had worn all morning. Major General Rebecca Whitmore stood beside the diagnostic cart while the reserve Black Hawk was prepared in the eastern hangar. The rescue mission was still alive, but Raven 27 remained grounded beneath a sky that had darkened to charcoal over the mountains. Open the panel, Tom said. Ethan reached for the fasteners, then paused. What are we looking for? Not yet, Tom replied. First, tell me what your system assumes. Ethan glanced at the green screens. That the circuit remains closed once the relay engages. Good. And what did the aircraft tell you? Ethan looked toward Noah's waveform. That something moved after engagement. Tom nodded. Now we test the assumption. The panel came free with a soft metallic release. Inside, bundled wiring, connectors, and relay housing sat in perfect order. Nothing appeared burned, loose, or damaged. Ethan examined the assembly with a flashlight. It looks clean. Most hidden failures do, Tom said. He opened the old leather pouch and removed a narrow wrench, a small insulated probe, and a compact heat gun worn smooth around the handle. The tools looked ancient beside the digital meters, but each had been maintained with exact care. Tom handed the probe to Ethan. You will do the work. Ethan looked surprised. Why me? Because the next aircraft may not have an old man standing beside it. Noah connected the maintenance microphone near the relay housing. Tom instructed Ethan to cool the connector with compressed air, then apply the same electrical load recorded during startup. The meter remained steady. Every value stayed inside tolerance. Ethan looked up. Still normal. Tom pointed to the waveform display. Do not watch only the number. Watch the time. Ethan repeated the test. The relay closed. A fraction of a second later, the probe trembled beneath his fingers. The second click sounded inside the open panel. The reading dipped and recovered so quickly that the digital display barely changed. Noah expanded the trace. A narrow drop appeared, less than 1 second wide. There, Noah whispered. Ethan leaned closer, his face tightening with realization. The connection separates under cold load, then returns before the system stores a fault. Yes, Tom said. Now warm it. Ethan applied gentle heat. The metal expanded. He repeated the test. 1 click. No separation. No visible error. The connector looked flawless again. Ethan stared at it, as though seeing the entire morning differently. The sensor was never the cause. It only reacted to the same disturbance, Tom said. You replaced the witness and called the case solved. Rebecca watched Ethan absorb the lesson. There was no humiliation in Tom's voice, only precision. Ethan removed the connector and inspected the contact under magnification. A tiny line of wear crossed one edge, almost invisible beneath the polished surface. Under cold contraction, it was enough to break the circuit. He replaced the assembly with a new unit, checked the seating twice, and secured every connection by hand. Tom observed without interfering. When the panel was ready, Ethan looked at him. Do we close it? Tom shook his head. We asked the question one more time. They cooled the new connector, applied full load, and listened. 1 click answered from inside the aircraft. Clean. Final. Ethan released a breath and turned toward Tom. I was wrong. Tom placed the old probe back into the leather pouch. No, you stopped too early. He looked toward Raven 27 as the first drops of rain darkened the concrete. Being wrong is temporary. Refusing to listen is what makes it dangerous. Rain began as a scatter of dark marks on the concrete, each drop vanishing almost as soon as it landed. Ethan secured the avionics panel while Noah removed the maintenance microphone and checked the final trace. 1 clean peak stood alone on the screen. No second movement followed it. Major General Rebecca Whitmore looked toward the eastern hangar, where the reserve aircraft still waited for the hoist transfer to be completed. The storm had already covered half the northern ridge. How long before Raven 27 can be tested? She asked. Ethan looked at Tom before answering. 6 minutes, ma'am. A full cold load sequence, followed by an operational check. Tom closed the brass clasp on his leather pouch. Do not rush the sequence. Ethan nodded. There was no argument left in him. The team moved with a different kind of speed now, not the frantic motion of people trying to defeat a clock, but the disciplined rhythm of people who understood that every step carried weight. The pilot returned to the cockpit. The rescue crew secured their medical packs inside the cabin. Noah took his position beside the open diagnostic card, but this time he lowered the screen brightness and kept one ear uncovered. Ethan stood near the avionics bay. Tom remained beyond the yellow line. He had done what he came to do. The rest belonged to them. The pilot initiated the start. The auxiliary power unit rose through the rain, its steady whine spreading across the flight line. Indicator lights appeared in sequence. Fuel pressure stabilized. Electrical load increased. The first relay closed. Click. Nothing followed. Ethan waited, eyes fixed not only on the numbers, but on the aircraft itself. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. The circuit held. The first engine came alive, followed by the second. Rotor blades began their slow turn above the cabin, gathering speed until rain lifted from the concrete in silver sheets. Noah looked at the waveform and smiled. One clean response. Ethan did not celebrate yet. He completed every required check, read every value aloud, and waited for confirmation from each technician. Only then did he turn toward the general. Raven 27 is ready for flight. Rebecca looked at Tom. He listened for several seconds, head slightly raised beneath the rain. Then he gave one small nod. The Black Hawk lifted from the flight line and turned north toward the closing mountains. Nobody cheered. The team simply watched until its dark shape disappeared beneath the clouds. 40 minutes later, the radio announced that the rescue crew had reached the ridge. 20 minutes after that, Raven 27 emerged from the rain with the stranded hikers safely aboard. When the aircraft settled onto the concrete, Ethan walked to Tom in front of the entire maintenance team. I nearly cleared it because the screens gave me the answer I wanted, he said. You heard what I ignored. I owe you an apology. Tom studied him for a moment, then opened the leather pouch and removed the narrow wrench Daniel Mercer had once placed in his hand. He offered it to Ethan. This tool is older than you are. It is not special. Ethan accepted it carefully. Then why give it to me? Tom looked toward Noah, then toward the quiet Black Hawk cooling in the rain. So you remember that the most important tool a technician carries is not in the box. Ethan closed his hand around the wrench. Tom turned away from the flight line as Rebecca watched him go. Behind him, Raven 27 answered the rain with the soft ticking of cooling metal, and this time, every person nearby stopped long enough to listen. Technology records what happened. Experience hears what is about to.